New York prosecutors are also reportedly investigating another payment allegedly meant to silence a second woman who claims she had an affair with Donald Trump. According to people familiar with the matter who spoke with the Wall Street Journal, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office is looking into a deal involving Trump and former Playboy model Karen McDougal. Similar to the Stormy Daniels case, McDougal claims she was paid $150,000 in 2016 to keep her silent about a previous affair with Trump. In this incident, however, the alleged deal was struck between McDougal and a longtime friend of Trump's, former National Enquirer publisher David Pecker. McDougal and Trump's own former personal attorney Michael Cohen claim that Trump and Pecker agreed to what's known as a catch and kill deal. As the agreement would have it, Pecker would buy the rights to any negative story about Trump to prevent it from ever being made public. Last week, Pecker was called in to testify before the Manhattan grand jury in the Daniels case. Remember, that was sort of after word of the indictment came out, and this was the second time he had been in there. Here's what Lenny Davis, attorney to Michael Cohen, said about this to CNN yesterday.
You're saying that your client, Michael Cohen, also gave documentation, evidence that will show that there was hush money paid in maybe in an illegal way to Karen McDougal, who was a former Playboy model?
The answer is yes, but so did others involved in that transaction, including, as we know publicly, the head of the National Enquirer, Mr. Pecker, was involved in that transaction that Michael Cohen was forced to plead guilty to, even though he didn't pay the money. National Enquirer paid the money in an arrangement with Mr. Trump.
All right, when asked for a comment, a Trump spokesman told the Wall Street Journal there was no crime. George Conway, we've been hearing this from news sources through the weekend that Karen McDougal, David Pecker may be involved in this indictment as well, and that's what we should keep our eyes on. Of course, we won't know until the indictment's unsealed. It is interesting, though, that they brought David Pecker in at the very end before they came down with the indictment. What can you tell us?
Well, I think it goes, the question of the second woman goes to the intent, the fraudulent intent of the entire scheme to create false records and a false paper trail about what the nature of the payments were, what they were for. Whether they can be folded into a books and records charge against the Trump organization, I don't really know. We'll have to see what the facts are. And I agree with Andrew that there are things we don't know here. We don't know everything that the prosecution has. We don't know everything about we don't know their thinking about how they're going to plead the charges, specifically to make it a felony as opposed to a misdemeanor under state law. Well, there's just a lot of things that we don't know, and we still won't know even after we see the indictment, which will, as Andrew says, be a speaking indictment that's going to lay out a lot more evidence than a regular indictment.
And yet, George, members of our former party going out, continuing to crow about how this is a weak charge. This is a miscarriage of justice. This is the politicalization, the weaponization of government, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Again, they don't know. None of us know. None of us know the extent of this, and it's just so reckless. It may end up. Maybe it ends up being exactly what we originally thought this was going to be. But again, they're talking about possibly over 30 counts right now. But the exact nature of this, nobody knows. So it's impossible to pass judgment on whether it's a strong indictment or not.
That's absolutely right. And I think one of the things about this that's really quite remarkable is how the Republican Party has put itself in the position of defending a man who paid $130,000 in hush money to a porn star in the waning days of a presidential election, and did that, without compunction. Did that. I mean, it would have been it was a scandal in and of itself, and yet they're completely inured to it. And the reason is because once you start admitting that Donald Trump does something that's wrong, or does lies, and does little things that are wrong, or slightly bigger things that are wrong, you have to open up to everything that you know he did, that he lied about, and that you lied for him about if you're a Republican, and pretended that didn't exist. And that is the problem for the Republican electorate. I mean, people talk about, we always hear discussion here about how, the Republican Party, when is it going to come to its senses? Well, the problem here is you have millions of Americans who allowed themselves to be taken in by this man and decided they were going to ignore all negative evidence about him and pretend that he was a normal human being, pretend that he was a sane human being, pretend that he was a competent president, pretend that you know how to spell, pretend all of these things. And the reality is he was none of those things, and they engaged in self-deception for multiple years. And to admit that's really hard, and that's the reason why Trump will have a stranglehold, I think, on this nomination process.
So interesting. We have a lot more to talk about pertaining to this. Of course, that's going to happen tomorrow, but we're looking at security and preparations for that. Also, Trump's own words, ginning up support and action for him, and also the fundraising off of this, which has begun and has been quite successful. We'll have all that coming up. But